guys. Look for the blood in the smoke. We're there.
Will, hello.
Hey Jacob.
How are you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Good, man. Yeah, very well, thank you. We've spoken a bit about Warfare already, but it's a remarkable film in that we were actually saying that it's not one you enjoy. Did you have to reckon with whether you were going to sign up to it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did. I didn't have a desire to really be part of a war film necessarily. I think because to a large extent, my experience of watching war films in the context of like Hollywood has been sort of characterized by quite a lot of like glorification, romanticization, and I didn't want to contribute to that. And I probably should have known better that Alex Garland and a former Navy SEAL in joining forces were not going to fall prey to kind of contributing to that sort of catalogue of films. And I jumped at the opportunity to work on Warfare because the MO from the outset was to not glorify, not romanticize, but kind of provide a sort of, in my opinion, much needed and refreshing objective take on war. And in turn, I think have veterans more accurately represented and also provide civilians with an opportunity to understand war from a more kind of truthful vantage point. And that felt very, very important.
and of course there were some scenes there that are just like, whoa, like they've been staying with me ever since, and God knows how it must have been for you filming it. It must have required a bit of levity when the cameras were switched off, and you obviously had a great cast around you.
Yeah.
How did you guys kind of deal with it when Alex called cut and then you went home for the night?
Yeah, it's, I think one of the things we were very conscious of throughout the process is whatever difficulty and strain we were sort of feeling over the course of making this thing, it was going to pale in comparison to reality, right? So there was no excuse not to give absolutely everything at all times. But that's also not to say that it wasn't intense and trying and sometimes quite traumatic. And one of the ways to sort of respond to that is to engage in levity and humour. And in that respect, I think we mirrored what I understand to be the real-world experiences of people in the military community, and the men and women who do serve in those spaces often rely on levity and humour to get through, trying and difficult circumstances. And it is all relative, and as a group of actors, we were finding it trying and difficult at times. And so we engaged in that levity and humour and relied on it in sometimes what seemed like some of the most unlikely circumstances. And it was great, and it was also just a natural byproduct of the bonds that we'd formed. And, after a 3.5-week boot camp, I felt like I'd known some of these guys for years. And at this stage, I feel like I've known them my whole life. I can't imagine, not having known Michael Gandolfini my whole life or Kit Connor, these guys who I've grown incredibly close to now, and I hope I'll know for the rest of my life.
Is there a group chat?
There's a group chat.
Yeah.
There is a group chat, a very active group chat. I honestly think if it hasn't been every day, it's been every other day since we wrapped. That we've spoken on that group chat and people have contributed to it, which is really special.
Yeah, man. Who's the best for a bit of a laugh, or is it shared between them?
I think Michael Gandolfini's probably the biggest sort of clown of the group, but he's also simultaneously like one of the wisest and most soulful. He's sort of he's an amazing character, but he is very active in the comedy department within that group. Yeah,
that's that new guy energy.
This series that I do is called Go to Bat, and we like to basically shine a light on your projects that you think is deserving of more love. What is that for you?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I and I don't want to like sort of misrepresent, I think, where the film was successful and certainly like the well-founded pride that I think a lot of people who are involved have in it. But Detroit comes to mind, I think because it came out at a time, almost exactly 50 years after the date that the real event that we were depicting happened, at a time in America which was especially turbulent in respect of, I think, how the African American community were being treated by police, and there was a lot of, I would say, socio-political unrest in America at that time. And it was sort of ironic that the film was depicting this and trying to draw attention to it, and it garnering that attention was sort of difficult because I think folks were struggling to reckon with something that was sort of holding up a mirror to society, and also asking, you know, people to confront something that was like very, very present at the time. It almost felt too painful for, I think, people to confront. I think we really wanted people to reckon with it because there were lessons within the film, or, to my mind, things that were explored in the film that could have helped us sort of better understand the moment and the challenges that were, of course, sadly, things that never disappeared and have still not gone away entirely, of course, but were particularly volatile and needed like addressing sort of immediately. It was like an Overton window that I think, you know, was potentially missed.
Start praying!
It's not even necessarily a film you enjoy, but it's a film that I think is important, and certainly it was transformative for me, and incredibly educational. And I'm so grateful to have worked for Catherine Bigelow, who, quite honestly, is an exemplary leader, and a lot of the things that I learned about leadership and probably applied in warfare came from watching Catherine Bigelow, someone who, you know, would put their ego aside, would hear every voice in the room, didn't feel as a leader that she always needed to be the person to come up with a plan of action, deferred to people over their, you know, superior expertise in certain areas, but then also had the confidence and authority to take ownership of a moment and lead herself when necessary. And she is, to this day, like one of the best examples of leadership I've seen.
I mean, the role you play in that film, challenging in many ways. The effectiveness of that film rests on your shoulders, Jack Rayner's shoulders, in many respects. How do you kind of, as an actor, when you're doing that and acting it, you know, not go into a space where you're like, you go home feeling really rough?
If you do any, you know, anything more than a surface level, you know, deep dive into the racist rhetoric, you see it's characterized by complete mythology. There's like, not only is there no fact to sort of, you know, kind of prop up the racist rhetoric, but actually what's really disturbing is it's a subversion of the facts. And, you know, the racist rhetoric is defined by this idea that, you know, the black community are a threat to white people. And not only is that a lie, but it's a subversion of the truth, which is that historically white people have always been a threat to the black community. And so in just discovering that, I think in order to play a character as aggressively racist as my character was, you just embrace this mythology, this idea that you are kind of denying fact and embracing almost like science fiction. And that's the way I sort of approached it. Preparing for this role, I was educated by a woman called Ziza Delgado, who is an expert in African American history and ethnicity studies, and she taught me things that I really wish I'd learned at school. You know, I think I'm a product of the British education system, and unfortunately, you know, the curriculum sort of teaches a very kind of whitewashed and Eurocentric version of history that doesn't give enough attention to the experience of black people, or really depict the black experience enough outside of subjects such as slavery and oppression. And that does a huge disservice to the diaspora, but also the many contributions that black people have made to this country, and you know, the many contributions that have enriched British culture. So, you know, to get the opportunity to sort of re-educate myself and unlearn as much as learn was massive. And if it weren't for Detroit, I wouldn't have received that education. And it's another thing that makes me very, very grateful for the project.
You think we're bluffing? We don't bluff.
Another project that you have been involved in that tackles race relations across a series is the Underground Railroad. You were in an episode of that. Now, I think that is one of, I mean, and when I say underrated, I think it's very highly rated from the people who watched it.
Right,
but
right.
I don't know for whatever reason if a lot of people, it still passed some people by. But to be involved with that, working with Barry, I mean,
Yeah. Dude, I know.
what was that?
Yeah,
like?
you make a really good point. I mean, it's an unbelievable performance from Tuso and also from Aaron. They are exceptional. And for me to work with Barry Jenkins was an enormous opportunity. He really is like a singular filmmaker. I think he's phenomenal. I only had a small part, and I was actually quite glad, in contrast to my character as Kraus in Detroit, to play like something of an ally in Underground Railroad. But again, you know, that experience was educational for me also, and I felt very honoured to have a space in it as a white character.
I have to ask you a few little questions about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I'm sure there were some people hoping for your name. Any chance?
I'm delighted for many of the people that I know in that universe, especially Joe Quinn, obviously, my fellow Warfare castmate, you know, so deserving. I'm so excited to see him in Fantastic Four and now Doomsday as well. Yeah, it's fully deserved.